see my artistically designed PowerPoint. Okay, so as I was saying, today I kind of want to just begin by very brief and very broad sort of overview of some of it. I mean, basically, if you have read the required readings and understood them and can formulate a kind of opinion about them, or a few opinions about them, and maybe the most important thing is that you can draw kind of conceptual connections across these readings. Then you're going to be fine, And so, in that regard, what are some of the conceptual connections between the readings thus far? What are some major themes that all or many of the articles have been addressing? Maybe. What's maybe one? Ron?
The effect on society,
yes.
Social implications of it?
Absolutely. I mean, that's what they're all about, right? The social implications, or the effect on society and the effects on business, yes, basically. Okay. So what are some other, sort of conceptual connections within that? Renata?
Maybe who holds particular powers within a society?
A lot of them are addressing that, especially, last week and even this week, a lot of it is about, who holds power through new media, or how is maybe new media changing power balances? Yes, absolutely. So that's something you're going to want to keep in mind as you're reviewing the articles. How does that play in? What else?
New media and the idea of collectivism as well as individualism, like the period.
Yes, and that, kind of ties in very much the idea of collectivism versus individualism, and it ties in to the kind of relationships that new media enables or encourages or enforces, depending on how you want to look at it. And, in that case, what you're talking about is the idea that sort of new media ICTs, I should just say, that basically new media ICTs enable and encourage, intensify a sort of what is often called, many of the articles refer literally to networks, social networks, relationships that sort of have these characteristics, which are, you said individualistic, so very self-interested, and yes, very, in many ways, individualistic. Of course, other people argue that, new media is in fact making us more collectivistic, or it's doing both, and that's for the better, or that's for the worse. But this idea of sort of social networks is a key theme that comes out in many of the articles literally. That's what they use, is the verb or is the word networks. Or they may frame it in different terms. The sort of traditional sociological Gemeinschaft, traditional relations between people, versus Gesellschaft, which are sort of modern relations between people. Of course, Gesellschaft would map onto the idea of social networks. So that is, possibly I would say this is the main connector. This idea that new media is changing our relationships with each other, at least at a group level, probably also interpersonally. So that's one thing to focus on when you're going through your readings and reviewing for next week's test. Can you think of any other concepts that are sort of key across at least a couple or more than one of the articles?
Like private information in a public space?
Yeah, well, absolutely. And again, this idea of privacy versus sort of either surveillance or just kind of more open sharing of information, you know, this dynamic or problematic very much also maps into that idea of individualism versus collectivism, or you know, social networks versus you know, more collective arrangements. So, you know, that's what you want to be doing when you're studying, is kind of thinking of ways how you can kind of draw these kind of connections. So privacy, sharing or / surveillance, individualism, collectivism, traditional organizations, whether they're hierarchies and bureaucracies or villages and communities, against social networks that are based on weak ties, that are highly individualistic, that carry these traits. I mean, I show you this slide all the time. If you review the and do review the PowerPoints. Any other things you can think of? There are other things that you can, that if you, once you're reviewing the articles with this in mind, looking for connections, we should come up with, like innovation is one, right? I mean, if you looked at the first article that we studied, which was, what's the name of it? I can't remember, but it's the first article from our first day. It was where a guy offered a review of the field of new media scholarship, and he sort of related that to theories of innovation. Then, you know, that's what Yochai Benkler is talking about today a lot, is innovation, the idea, you know, that the sort of social networking that ICTs enable is a boost for innovation. He also says it's a boost for democracy, you know, which is, you know, obviously, well, both are debatable. Any other connectors that you can, conceptual connections that you can think of between these articles? Are there any questions? I mean, I'm not sure how much you've studied so far, and, you know, I've been trying each class to sort of review the last week's readings and fit in discussion of that day's readings. But are there any questions you have at this point about, you know, any of the articles? That, you know, again, I'll talk today about today's articles and last week's articles as well. But, okay. If you have any questions during the course of the week, I mean, you've got one more week before the midterm, don't hesitate to shoot me an email, and I'll respond as quickly as possible. That's it. Are there any other questions about anything, basically? I feel bad talking about the research proposal 1 week before you're worrying about your midterm, but you don't really have to worry too much about it. The research proposal, just a reminder, is due, I think, 2 weeks after the midterm, so like 3 weeks from now, November 10th. Look at it on the syllabus. You know, I give a pretty detailed description of what I'm looking for on the research, or on the research proposal. And if you have any questions, ask me about those too. Okay. What I want to do today is, first of all, find my pointer. Where is it? There we go. I want to put this back on slideshow. Okay. What I want to do today, review last week's reading, in particular the reading by Roll on critical theory and new media scholarship, because I think that one was quite theoretically complicated, shall we say. And then, of course, get today's reading in more detail. But before that, maybe I just, you know, throw out a little bit about, you know, today's readings. Especially in particular, Yochai Benkler. Who has anyone actually heard of, at least heard of Yochai Benkler before? If so, show your hand. 1, 2. Okay, a couple of you. You know, he's a major figure, you know, in new media scholarship. He's a legal scholar at Harvard, and you know, he basically, and he would deny being a cyber utopian, you know, but he's basically the, I would say, one of the smartest of the figures in the field today who kind of lean in that direction. What's he basically saying? I mean, what he's saying in the article you read today is basically what he's saying in a more famous book that he put out, The Wealth of Networks, in 2006. Well, what's he basically saying, or what are some points that he's making, arguments, claims that he's quoting? Anything? What's he saying about the relationship between ICTs, you know, contemporary ICTs, especially internet-enabled ICTs, and he's making a claim about economics and about politics, which is
It's better for democracy?
Yeah, he's basically, you know, and this is why I sort of say he's leaning towards cyber utopianism, because he's basically saying it's not only good for democracy, it's also good for the economy. And in particular, you know, he's talking about, he kind of says two things that distinguish what he calls the information network economy, or is it the network information economy? One or the other. I think it's the network information economy. And he's basically saying that there's two distinguishing characteristics of it, especially with the birth of the internet. It enables business and other organizational relationships that are very dispersed in space and sort of that can be really broadly collaborative. It's not only that in your organization, let's say in your company, you can easily collaborate with people in far-flung departments or people in branches of your company in different countries. It's not just that. It's also that increasingly